Hello, Culture Matters podcast. I'm so excited to introduce you to our guest. But before I do that, here's a quote I picked just for this episode randomly. Here it is. Nothing on earth consumes a man more quickly than the passion of resentment. Friedrich Wilhelm Nietzsche. Our guest today is a returning guest, a friend of the Culture Matters podcast, your doctor, Dr. David Yerkes. What can I say about him? A friend, a mentor, advisor to those smart enough to seek help in their overall holistic worldview of exercise, nutrition, psychology of performance. Day to day, he's helping patients. Nighttime, there's a signal in the sky and a light and a bat. Here we go. Where is this introduction going? Thanks for coming back, brother. Always like picking your brain on also on leadership, on health, and I'm excited to talk about culture today with you and what you have going on. So thanks for coming
Absolutely.
back.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me back. I always enjoy our conversations every
What do
time.
you think
So,
about this quote?
I think it's true. I think he said if you'll remind me, he says something. He's basically saying resentment is not is kind of like a poison, right? Is that
Well, it's
just
interesting.
said it?
The consumes a man, right? Nothing
Yes.
on earth consumes a man
Mm,
more quickly than the passion of resentment.
mm.
Where does poison come to mind when you think of that?
Well, I think I was being biased by my kind of historical thought of a quote I'd heard about holding grudges is kind of like drinking poison and expecting somebody else to be injured or harmed, and so when you're holding a grudge or resentment, if you will, you're basically just harming yourself and holding yourself back, and the other person is not really affected by it, and you're just negatively affecting your own self and your own health and your own mindset and your even progress in life. So, um, you've everybody's heard the term living rent free inside your head, and I think Mike Tyson actually has a good. He's brought this up a couple times in recent years where he talks about when you let somebody um, when you let the thought of somebody consume you like that, they own you and you're not your own anymore because now you're consumed by something that they've done or said. And so he says you're a slave now to that person. So I've heard him say that a couple times, and I think that's pretty powerful. It's definitely a nice mindset shift to help people move on because it is resentment is consuming. I mean, it is very powerfully consuming to people. So um why is that? Why does that affect us so much? I don't know, but it definitely does.
Yeah, how do we move on?
Well, I think trying to be aware, awareness is always the first step, I think, for a lot of things. And then being intentional about wanting to and realizing the benefit, realize that this is harming myself. This is not getting me anywhere. These feelings and this resentment uh isn't productive to my own life. So recognizing that first and then, using techniques to realize just kind of rise above it essentially and realize that these are non-productive feelings. I really like a lot of the stuff that the Stoics teach, in this particular sense, um, to kind of help people just essentially rise. It's not that you don't have emotions, but you can rise above your emotions. You can move past them. So still have emotions, that's fine, but then use your mind to overcome that and move forward.
How?
Well, I think it takes practice. I think that's not something that is necessarily natural to us. So I think, it takes practice to first recognize that you're doing it. Again, like I said, recognition is the first step, and then I think uh just working continuously, practicing, and even consuming also. And this kind of gets into another kind of philosophical belief of mine, but basically you are what you consume, right? Literally and figuratively and mentally, everything. So if you're consuming literature or media that would lead you to be more uh, like developed as in that sense, you said how do we do that? Well, one of the ways to do that is to consume media and literature that helps you stay in that right mindset to help you move forward from those things and rise above and etc. I think that's one way. I don't know if that's the only way.
What do you think of this? If we possess our why of life, we can put up with almost any how.
Yeah, I've heard that. That's pretty good. Is that who is that?
The same guy,
Okay,
Fred.
Nietzsche.
Yeah, why do I like Fred so much?
I think that he was a very deep. He was searching, I think, and I think maybe that's where you are. You're searching constantly, and so I think that's where you guys probably align. It's just kind of that
I think
search
like I
for
use so many of
meaning.
his quotes. It's like maybe I need to use other people's quotes. It's like, what do I work for, Fred?
Well, I mean, he's got some good quotes. I don't necessarily align with him on everything, but he definitely had a reason behind. He was very thoughtful and particular about where he was coming from, um and I think that you're like that a lot too. You're very what would I say, a critical thinker, and very just scrutinize your own thoughts and why are you even thinking those thoughts.
Mhm.
And so I think that he was like that in a lot of ways.
How did you come to that observation of me?
Just observation. I can see the wheels turning to some degree, and then just by the way, if I watch kind of how you speak, I can tell as you're speaking that you're even scrutinizing the way that you're articulating something to make sure that you're actually saying something that aligns with what you really believe. And so, and then also at the same time, it seems like you're even trying to figure out what do you believe sometimes as you're speaking, because you're speaking it and then kind of evaluating it as you're speaking it to even learn. It seems like. And does that sound accurate?
Yeah, well, what the hell is going on? Yeah, yeah. I'd love to know what the audience thinks. So let's ask them. Yeah, what do you guys think? Oh, wait, we can't actually interact with the audience. Now,
Well,
why do you think what the hell's that going through my mind right now? Why do where the hell am I going with this?
I don't know. So I think self-awareness is important to you, and self-awareness is an important asset to have as a leader, and as somebody that's interested in culture. Because if you're not constantly evaluating what you're saying and what you're thinking and being aware of who you are and what you believe, then you're kind of you're you're not, I don't think, as capable of holding that authority, if you will. as a leader or a consultant or what have you. So I think you should always be, and that's how you learn and grow. And so if you think you're the same for the rest of your life for the next 20 years, then, or you should be, then I think that's wrong. So we should be constantly evaluating our own selves to learn and grow. Otherwise we go backward. So it's a good thing to be evaluating yourself and being self-aware.
What when in from your observation and being in leadership positions, management, when those in positions of authority are not in that endeavor, how does that impact the company culture?
Oh, it's obviously it's obvious to everybody else, right? Who they are and how they practice and how they lead. Everybody knows it. So if they're not aware, they're the one that's in the dark, right? And so as a leader, you don't want to be the person that's in the dark. So the more self-aware you can be, the better leader you're going to be. And also, I mean, and that you could get into 1,000 different scenarios on that, but that's why it's important to have a culture that has open and honest, some kind of mechanism for, true feedback. So you're not just leading in a bubble, in a yes, where you're just surrounded by people who are going to tell you what you want to hear or what they think you want to hear. And that requires a leadership culture. You have to cultivate that as a leader, because you can say, oh, I have an open door policy, or tell me, what you think. But if your actions say the opposite, then that's not the culture you're cultivating. So you have to cultivate that by your actions and by your own leadership principles. And so being self-aware is part of that. Because again, like if you're not self-aware, like I said, everybody else that knows you, everybody in your company knows you as the real you, pretty much, at least the work you.
So you think part of it is being able to distinguish between one's actions and one's speech?
I think that's a huge part of leadership and culture in a corporation, especially because a lot of leaders know, well, first of all, a lot of times the right thing is not the easy thing, right? It's the harder thing is almost always true. And so in there's a lot of leaders that know the right answer. They could spout off to you what the right thing is to do in principle, right? Not necessarily in a particular situation, but how to be a good leader and how to have open communication and how to have a good culture. And they could tell you that.
What if hierarchy implicitly undermines self-awareness? Because if I'm promoted above the former rank that I was in, so there was the former labor that I was representative of, what the presupposition, one of the presuppositions of that promotion would be my actions formerly were representative of value, right? Value creation. So that then would lead to my speech being more, my speech filling that gap. So for example, because now I'm promoted to a higher authority for past labor, someone else is going to take that spot, space and time wise, meaning someone else is going to do the job I was doing, right? Not me.
Right.
Someone else is going to take that place in action, where formerly it was my action in that place, right? Now I'm moving up hierarchically, which does that even exist outside of social interaction? I mean, I don't know. Let's experiment with this for a second. So let's say it does. It exists outside of it. but I'm moving up the quote unquote ladder. It's no longer my action that's doing that labor. It's my speech that's holding accountable to the labor. Because the labor is another person now representing the former labor I represented in my action. So now, if I'm not acting it out, I'm speaking it out because someone else is acting it out. If that someone else has any, if there's any tension between our relationship, my speech will invert. My speech will not inspire. It will incent. That's not the right word.
Demotivate, essentially.
Yeah, like there'll be dissent, condescend,
Yes.
castigate, curtail. So meaning there's, so what if, part of the reason consultants, advisors, we even have to have these conversations is implicit in growth, right? The growth of the hierarchy. There's a tension. Because if you got promoted because of your actions, because of your character, your actions, your ability to perform and get an output, now your speech is what's representative of that former action in relation to your subordinate, who's now the labor in that dichotomy of a relationship.
So your ability to communicate and your speech and your leadership is the value you bring versus the labor.
Well, okay, so in that context, because you're not laboring anymore in that context,
right.
Your labor now is going to be in a different context,
right?
And so they're too busy. Your subordinate is watching you labor in whatever new context you're in, and they're listening and hearing you speak with them, to them, through yourself, through the relationship you have with them. So you get promoted based on your former labor, your former action, word interaction with whatever subordinate authority and peer group you had. It's like a circle, right? But it has a north, south, east, and west to it. North is authority, south is subordinate, east and west is peer to peer. Put your friend on one side and your enemy on the other side. Now you have your personhood. You get promoted up the hierarchy with new authority for, let's say, a new context of action, labor. So you never stop laboring, but the labor changes. The
skill set changes. So your skill set that you got promoted for originally was maybe, we'll say, engineering. And then say you're a really, really good engineer, and then you get promoted to be a leader in that company. Now there's a completely different skill set that you're required to have as a leader that you may not have been required to have as a laborer engineer. Is that what you're saying?
Well, let's unpack that. That's a good direction to go in. So, what does it even mean to be a leader? Is it a manager? Is my promotion in a position where I'm accountable for other people below me? Is that the move? So I'm accountable for their results.
Yes. So that's one of yes, exactly. That's essentially, in a corporate structure, that would be part of the responsibilities of a leader. Is you're essentially accountable for the results of your subordinates.
Great. So let's say that I'm accountable for the results of my subordinates. So in my former position, I was acting out a narrative. I was executing upon objectives there were outcomes that maybe I had a higher likelihood of control over because I was closest to respond. So my ability to respond increased or decreased my success, my responsibility.
Right.
My responsibility. So I was responsible and produced at a high level. I was physically able to just do it, get it done myself. And I got it done at a high level. What if there's a tension between that behaviorism, getting it done myself, and being promoted to a position where now I'm getting it done with a subordinate, where action became before speech when I was doing it myself, because I'm the one doing it. So I'm talking, maybe I'm talking up the chain. This is what I'm doing. This is how I'm doing it. I'm being proactive in my speech that way, and I'm being proactive in my actions by getting it done. Now I get promoted, and it switches. My words are how I'm going to influence, increase, or decrease the likelihood of my subordinate getting it done. Because if my action comes first and I do it for them, that'll undermine them. At the same time, one could say, if I never do it for them, how are they going to learn? So is there a seasonality to it? Is it winter, fall, spring, summer? Wait, did I just say it wrong? Winter, spring, summer, fall? Yeah, I just so where I'm going with this is I get promoted based on my ability to act, speak, think, interact. Contextually, the relationship I have in my work is going to be different than when I go up and I'm now responsible, able to respond to someone else's lack or contribution of responsibility, their ability to respond. So my speech, how I speak, how I listen is going to impact that interaction. There's going to be, and I know I may not necessarily have the same, I'm not going to be behaving the exact same way. My behaviorism is going to have to adapt to that relationship.
And actually listening, you mentioned listening is extremely, a lot of people think of an inspirational leader as somebody who speaks a lot. And actually listening is one of the most important aspects of leadership, because how do you know, again, being a good listener and knowing how to even draw things out of your subordinates is extremely important. More important than speaking, in my opinion. Obviously, your words have to match up with your values and the values, and so and what you display as a person. So if you say we support our employees, we want da 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 da, and then everything you do, as a corporation or as a company or as a leader says the opposite, your actions say the opposite, then obviously that's not in alignment, and people recognize that pretty quickly. But the ability to listen as a leader is I think more important than the ability to speak. And so because that's how you really find out what's going on and what people are thinking and what they need. Really, what they need is the most important, because our job as a leader is to put our subordinates in a position to be successful. That's our number one job. Give them the tools and the situation and the culture and the environment to be successful. That's what everybody wants, right? As a leader, as a business owner, you want your people to be successful. So give them the opportunity to be successful. And there may be times where you need to step in, depending on the situation. There's a million different situations. You may need to step in and show your expertise in that area as an engineer for a moment, and that may inspire people. And in the military, that happens sometimes. To be able to do that job at a high level is inspirational to your subordinates, but it's not necessarily it's not something that is required. I mean, if you look at a general officer, they're a general officer. It means they don't have a branch. If you look at their lapel, there's no branch on a general's lapel. They're a general officer, and they're expected to know not. And here's the thing: they're not expected to know everybody's job. They're expected to be a leader and rely on those experts in those fields and coordinate that expertise. So that, I think, is a really good example of being able to listen and not necessarily having to even the technical expertise of every single different field of the people that you're leading.
The question becomes, what is listening to someone that's only been spoken to? And put up with what has been said to them. Because think about it. If I'm a subordinate and my authority has, I'm a high functioning subordinate in the sense that I can act upon my thoughts and the combination of the thoughts of my authority figure to solve problem ABC. And I ultimately get things done. And the interactions that I have with my authority superior to me are them telling me what they think. And I listen to them. I don't even want to just say listen. But yeah, I partake in the interaction. Well, how well will I be able to bring forth the creative faculties? And so I get promoted inevitably. How well will I be able to bring forth the creative faculties of the less equipped subordinate that I have? Because see, I may have gotten promoted not because of my authority's capacity to lead me. I may have been promoted by my capacity to be a leader.
Well, I think
or self-led, productive, let's say.
Right. Yes.
You're a high
producer, a high performer. You're
like self-motivated.
Yeah.
I may be promoted for that. And now I get a subordinate that's not nearly as talented, not nearly as equipped. I would argue that I will not be prepared to lead them, because I think there's a difference between listening and learning. Like, and I don't even know the language. I've been trying to figure this out for some time, but like, the quality of the questions, when it comes to listening, there's an interactive quality,
yes.
a therapeutic, psychoanalytical, Socratic. Like there's an interactive process. So what do you think about where I'm going? Like how can we bring this to life?
It's empathy in leadership. So essentially, empathy isn't sympathy, right? It's being, it's being able to transpose yourself essentially into somebody else's thoughts or feelings and into their shoes and try to see what they're experiencing and try to at least understand what they're experiencing. That's extremely important in leadership, because this happens all the time, right? So first of all, there's an issue because most people that take leadership roles are not equipped to be leaders. They don't have any true leadership skills. They have those other set of skills, productivity skills, right? And they're promoted into a leadership position because of their productivity expertise. So that's problem number one. We should be developing leaders that are not in leadership positions yet. Number two, empathy for these high performers is very difficult, right? But it's essential. So, and that doesn't mean you have to be all touchy-feely. Empathy is important if you're negotiating with a terrorist, right? You don't have to agree with somebody to empathize with them. You just are trying to understand where they're coming from. And if you're a leader and you can't understand where your subordinates are coming from, then you're going to fail, or you're going to be less successful at figuring out what's going on. Because and here's the thing, like, they're probably not going to be almost certainly not as self-motivated and productive as you are, right? That's why you got promoted, because you were the superstar. But they're also might not be articulate at telling you. So you have to be able to sift through that and kind of just figure out, what are they trying to say, and Doug Crandall, he has a story that actually is really good that he told when he was teaching at West Point, and he kept referring to his sons all the time, because his sons were crazy, and I'm probably going to butcher the story, but they were always getting in trouble. And so he was always talking about his sons, but he has a daughter too. And this girl came to him, this little cadet, right? And he's a field grade officer, in the military. And this cadet comes and talks to him and says, "Sir, I think you're sexist," in his office, which is, of course, like, a lot of people wouldn't even think to say something like that to their professor. But the point of the story is he was able to, and he said, "What do you mean?" And so she told him, basically, "You talk about your sons all the time, and you never talk about your daughter." And he didn't realize it wasn't because he doesn't love his daughter too. It's just the examples he was using, were about, the crazy boys being crazy, and his daughter wasn't crazy like that. And so, and again, I'm probably butchering this story, so please, I hope people realize that. But the point of the moral of the story is, he was able to sift through her inarticulate feedback, and take it and realize something about himself that he was doing, he didn't realize he was doing. And so, as a leader, we have to be have the confidence. And I've been thinking about this a lot lately too, is the ability to do that, to take that feedback, even when it's inarticulate and maybe even offensive, requires confidence, self-confidence. Because if you don't have the confidence to do that, you're going to get upset, you're going to get your feelings hurt, you're going to be defensive, instead of being able to self-examine. And so I think you're absolutely right. There are people that this happens all the time, right? Most of the people that get promoted are high performers, and they get promoted because of their technical skills, if you will. But I believe, and this is something I've been talking about, we should be developing leadership skills to everybody, because even if you don't end up taking a leadership position, it's going to help
Let's say that they get promoted because
skills.
of they're competing, their competitive qualities.
Oh, okay.
Their performative qualities.
Right.
If I'm responsible for no one, I'm accountable to my results, I'm responsible for myself and my interpersonal relationships, and I'm fully bought in to my own life, and the company, yay or nay, is kind of at that stage questionable, but I'm competing, and I'm my values are tested in my ability to give my word and reveal my word in my action, the interactions, the outcomes.
Right.
So I'm competing. Who am I cooperating with? I'm cooperating with, in a micro way, whatever support I have, that will reveal what you're talking about, my propensity to the soft skills, how I cooperate with the support staff. That'll be a signifier of character, of more holistic managerial milieu, right? Like, there's person A and person B. Person A cooperates at the unbelievable toxic, like terribly with their support staff, high producer. Person B, high producer, but in all the support, there's cooperation filmed around the competitive nature that it executes upon the client relationship. So there's a competitive element to the controlling, responsible person. Like they're in control of their destiny because it's them that's doing it.
Mm-hmm.
It's them that's getting their work. It's them that's performing for the client, the customer. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Once they're promoted and now they're accountable for the results of other human beings, their responsibility, their ability to respond to interpersonal conflicts is going to be high level of cooperation needed within the culture. Or else they're going to compete within the culture. They're going to compete with their subordinate.
Right.
And undermine the cooperative elements necessary for the culture. And then therefore they're going to lose competitively to the marketplace. We're always competing.
Exactly. Yes.
Because we're competing against other companies. The question is, are we competing against ourselves at too high a degree to undermine the cooperation necessary to compete with the other businesses that we're in? And I think the qualities that attract promotion, conscientiousness, and creates it, like problem solving, even the responsibility could be tinged with a degree of not narcissism. I'm being extreme on that, but self-centeredness that has to metamorphosize, evolve into a cooperative integration. And that goes, there's a conflict.
I think that if you can recognize as an organization the people that do have that cooperative tendency, that it definitely yields, especially for promotional identification. I think cooperation always yields better results, obviously, because the lack of cooperation assumes omniscience, right? If you're not cooperating with others, then you think you know everything, and you don't.
Well, but okay, remember though, the person that is performing on their own, a high performer, it's not plural, it's singular. They
That'll
were
get you so
omniscient
far.
and they were omnipresent.
That will get you
Like,
so
because
far.
it's just me doing the work.
Right. But, and again, that will get you so far. But it's inferior, in my opinion, to a cooperative, for instance.
Yes. Well,
yes. And so for instance, I'm a physician, I work in the hospital. It's one of my jobs. And if I'm rounding and a nurse says, "Hey doc, this patient takes such and such at home. It wasn't listed on their home meds when they got admitted, but they take this medicine." And I say, "Hey, I'm the doctor. I know what I'm doing." And I ignore the nurse because she's a nurse. How different is that from a doctor that says, "Oh, thank you for bringing that to my attention"? It may be something I already knew. It might be something I already had control over, but the next time it might not have been. The next time it might be something I didn't know about. Right. And so if I promote that culture of cooperation, I am going to be better because I can't know everything. And I have to rely on multiple different, not just nurses, multiple different staff to do their expertise. And there are clinicians that do that to a lesser degree. And
this is a good example as a word picture.
I will always believe that cooperation, especially in that setting, is superior.
So let's take that scenario. The performer is in that interaction with the nurse attempting to offer information. Psychologically, that person is closed. It's a closed interaction because it's not an open feedback loop where imagine they're throwing a ball to the person. They throw the ball. He doesn't catch it and throw it back. He maybe catches it and keeps it. It's done. There's no more ball going back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say every time the ball went from the nurse to the doctor, you get a point. So the ball went from the nurse to the doctor, 1 point. In your scenario, she'd throw it, you get a point. You throw it back, you get another point. She'd throw it, you get a point. You throw it back, get another point. So 4 points is just here, blah, 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 like in two throwbacks. I look at as the points as energy flow, information, inform. It's inform.
Yes.
Form, the function is going to be proportional to the form, the dance, the interaction.
I thought I had another thought.
Go ahead. Yeah. This
if you will. So one of the things, and this kind of
goes
goes along with the whole performing it as an individual and being a high performer. One of the things that I've noticed in my different careers is that a lot of times when somebody thinks that they're performing as an individual, they're not. Other people are picking up the slack, and they're either not giving them credit or they're not recognizing it. And other people are just filling in the gaps around them.
Yes.
As well. So they think they're a high performer on their own, and really they're not. So that happens too.
That is also a symptom of that can be a symptom, is a natural symptom of a successful interaction, which is exemplary of the paradoxical nature of success, because success undermines itself. I'll give you an example. Well, this is an example, actually, this conversation. The perfect dichotomy of questions on my part, answers on yours, questions on your part, answers on mine. It goes to oblivion if we're extemporaneously pursuing the creativity of mind. It's trust that's going to undermine this ability to extemporaneously explore ideas together. Because the ratio of how much I've spoken to how much you've spoken, how much you've listened, how much I've listened, how deeply I've inquired in the caverns of your mind versus me is going to be out of whack inevitably. So this is my theory on psychologically. As soon as a constituent of a group, an individual of a group, is missing some form of, let's say, once that resentment builds off a conversation not had, let's say, because of an interaction that did occur, an occurrence, something happened that I formulated an idea about something. I felt a certain way about something that happened in my group of my team. And I've left it unexpressed. And I bet whether I've been unasked or I've not expressed it. That seed of unexplored emotion and thought will ferment and grow. Truth unspoken becomes poison. And over time, it will make the little things feel like big things. And in no matter what circumstance it is, when it's come to a group of people, a relationship, it'd be like you and we both with significant others, and we're tallying up every time we gave a little bit more than they did in each interaction. That'd be the end of that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
It's completely that's why it's like, I just have to say that I'm nothing without her. Because like, if I say anything else, it's revealing of the trust. So it's an imperfect ratio of today I won for our family, today she won, or whatever the binary is of a relationship. So where I'm going with this is, in any dynamic of a team, there's going to be people doing more than others at times. Naturally, it's an inevitability of life,
Right.
team, group dynamics, those compensations become blown out of proportion when elements of communication are missing. And the elements of communication, it correlates to, can be missing because there's elements of behavior that's missing. So it's not like it's just because we're not talking enough. They're quite literally, because it infers a possibility that there are certain things really wrong with our systems, our processes, our product, our value, dot, 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 dot. We've got to figure out what these problems are.
Right.
But just to, it's something that came like to bring into the conversation is that we're able to explore this like the audience may not be privy to this. We didn't know we were going to talk about when we popped on the show. We're both exploring an idea that was, I picked the quote 7 seconds before we started. I know I was going to pick, and just through some questions with Dr. David, let us hear, because he's bringing forth his expertise, his lived experience, his education, and I'm bringing forth mine. And here we are. So trust is the undercurrent for this open exploration of fleeting thoughts and ideas around leadership and culture. It's an example of what we're talking about. When the trust is low, there's not enough safety to explore. And my thesis is the
Absolutely.
actual system, business itself, is a silo, because it's a you could argue the ethics, whatever, the greater systems of government and all that, but business is a competition among other businesses. So there's a competitive element to business. The more it seeps inside of the company, where the people that work for the company and with each other compete against each other, they start losing in the marketplace. What are your thoughts?
I think that I think we're naturally competitive. And so there's going to be, I think the point you were making a few minutes ago about it's never completely equal. And there's a little bit of a kind of variation to different levels of who's contributing what. I think that also is the same with the competition within the company, right? So I think there may be a healthy level of competition that improves performance. And then but it's very, I think it would be very easy for that to become unhealthy and reduce performance, like you were saying, and overall be negative for the company if that becomes to the point where we're now truly competing with each other for resources and for attention and for other types of, even monetarily, within the company. Then that can truly become a negative force on the corporation. So but I think that I don't know that you can completely remove among peers any competition whatsoever within a company, because it's kind of part of our nature in a way. I don't know that I have any scientific proof for that, but that's kind of my my overall take.
What would be, what's the value in it?
The value in
Yeah, what's
maintaining
the
some level
value
of competition.
I think I need to firm up the term, what I mean by compete a little bit. Compete as in a closed communication loop. So when the nurse is attempting to give information,
I see.
and the doctor is, sorry, I could be a bit abstract. In the context of competition, it's closeness.
Right.
The more closed I am in my communication, which the less vulnerable, the less honest, open,
honesty,
I'm going to be competing with my employee.
Honesty, trust are, yes, those are, any the less of that you have, the less of the less productive and stable your
Like when
institution
you
is going to
explain
be.
that scenario of the doctor that didn't catch the ball from the nurse, the doctor that didn't, they knew it all. That
Yeah,
may have been true. How they related to that nurse was not cooperative. It was competitive. That's what
right.
I mean. So what's the likelihood that that nurse is going to help them in the future? It's lesser.
Exactly.
That was your point.
Yes.
You want to cooperate with them. I'm labeling it cooperation, and
Yes.
the other one competition. You're more open to the feedback.
Right.
They're going to want to play a game with you more in the future.
Yeah. And in my opinion, that cooperation goes there's so many ways. That was just one tiny example, but there's hundreds of ways probably where that cooperation is beneficial for me, for the patient, for the institution, for everybody involved. And so, I mean, I could sit here and go through all that, but ultimately the point is that cooperation is essential, and that culture, the culture of that, which I think is becoming the new norm, the cooperation in the hospital amongst different service lines, etc., is becoming more of the norm. Whereas prior, it seemed to be a little bit, I mean, I'm talking decades ago, was more in silos. But, honestly, hospital leaders have become more attuned to that and have really um, made that a focus of multidisciplinary teams, if you will, and that kind of thing to to really encourage cooperation. And I think it makes a difference. I've seen it in my career in the hospital, and I'm a big believer in it. But I think it probably translates to many other different types of industries as well.
Look at this picture.
Yes.
The first one, I'm only cooperating myself. I drew, guys, if you're not listening, girls, whatever, a circle, and there's arrows, pointing, facing each other, but in the circle. So anyone listening to this, draw a circle in front of you, and then draw an arrow pointing to the east and one pointing to the west inside of the circle. That's the high performer without any, there's no subordinate. It's just them. Their thoughts, words, and deeds. That cycle of life is wrapped up in themselves. And then if you look at the picture, draw, under it, you see how there's two circles now and they're separated. So you draw one circle and then draw another circle a few inches away, it's separated, and put the arrows between them. One arrow going from one circle to the other, one arrow for going from the other circle to the other circle. That means the thoughts, words, and deeds have to happen between the two people. But the person here, the high performer, it's not in their nature to communicate with another human being. They communicate with themselves. That creates conflict. What do you think of that?
Oh, I agree. I think it's also, I think that a lot of high performers that tend to want to say work alone or do things on their own genuinely mean well, and they have high standards and they want things done to a certain quality level. And so they don't trust somebody else to do it the way they would do it. Right. And I can certainly empathize with that. But the difference, and we're talking about moving up, right? We're talking about going from that job into the next job. The difference is, um, you, you can't, you have to be able to let that go to some degree. You have to be able to um, understand that maybe some of those things that you thought were so important in your work that you would not compromise on, there might be some compromises that need to be made in order to move the whole project or the whole company or what have you forward in the positive direction, instead of stalling, focusing on things that may not be completely essential, right? And I'm talking very abstract right now, but ultimately that is something that has to happen sometimes when people that are very particular about the work that they do, and so they don't want anybody else doing it or having their hands in it, um moving up to a leadership position and then wanting other people to do things the way they did it, that can cause a lot of conflict, and that you had mentioned earlier in the podcast. So yeah, I mean, I think it's part of the learning experience of being a leader, and being able to parse out which of those things are, you know, that you which of those things that are non-negotiable and which of those things can be compromised on. Does that kind of follow along with, and you're talking about cooperation. I kind of segued back into what we were talking about before, but it all kind of goes together, because I think one of the reasons why some of these people don't cooperate necessarily, the high performers with the very particular, is because lack of trust, right? They don't trust people to do things the way they would want to do them. And so, and then also, but then that can in turn um, lead to lack of trust in them from their subordinates, and cause, like you said, conflict or strife in that. So it's up to the leader. Ultimately, everything is on the leader. Everything is the fault of the leader. Everything. So it's up to the leader to figure that out and make that work and move in a positive direction,
Why?
because that's the nature of it. That's and that doesn't mean the leader has to go do the job of all the people, right? That means that they're responsible, as you mentioned before. They're responsible, and one of the skills of a leader that you have to develop is to be able to understand that everything is your fault, and you have to figure out a way to get that product or whatever it is uh to the point where it needs to be, and get the people that are your subordinates to be in the best position to do the best job they can do. And there's I mean, we're not going to get into, be able to have time to get into all the different possible scenarios that could happen that way, but uh ultimately it's the leader's job. It's everything is the leader's fault. And honestly, some people would say every failure is the failure of the leader and every success is the success of their team. And that's kind of true, but I'm kind of along the lines of, it's all about the leadership. The failures, every single failure, every success. And it's if and when I say it's about the leadership, so like for success, you're not supposed to take credit for success as a leader, and I don't necessarily disagree with that. But if you're not successful, you can't be successful without good leadership, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So the good leadership is a component of that success. Does that make sense?
Well, it depends.
And so you're not all success. You can be successful for a time being, in spite of lots of different faults, right? So, as a leader, as a corporation, as whatever, as a football team, whatever it is, you can be successful in spite of other faults. So it's not a, perfect system of absolutes, but ultimately, in general, if I'm speaking generally, you the success is a result of leadership also. And because with bad leadership, it's much more difficult to at least have sustainable success. So that's kind of how I look at it when if I was going to say teach leadership or mentor a leader, I would say essentially it all comes down to you have to be a good leader. And that means that you have good people that do their job. And then your job as a leader, number one, is to take care of your people, put them in position to be successful, and then stand back, essentially. Give them the tools, give them the resources, give them the environment and the culture to be successful, and then let them be successful. That is kind of the succinct, there's lots of other
Can you
aspects
repeat
of leadership.
that adage about when you fail, it's you or something in the team?
Yeah. So basically the old leadership adage, and I don't disagree with this, is when it's if every failure is on the leader and every success is on the team, is the subordinates essentially. And I don't disagree with that. That is true. Because basically what you're saying in that is saying, you know, good leadership by default, you're just doing your job. That is your job, is just to give them the resources. So it's like you shouldn't take credit for that. You don't get credit for just basically doing the
Well,
bare.
think about it. If the person who in a position of authority, right, ultimate decision ability,
Mm-hmm.
they have a possibility of autocracy, of dominance,
Right.
of tyranny. There's
Yes.
always the possibility of tyranny when there's someone ultimately that can decide.
Right.
They can cut off other possibilities. That person of authority with influence over their people, whether from power or whether from force
Or
or
from
from
referent authority.
love or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, whether from force or reciprocity, let's say, they have influence and therefore they have power. They're accountable to the outcome. So of course, if everything goes wrong, ultimately they're accountable.
Right.
They'll be on the chopping block because they're the one that decides who stays and who leaves. They're the one that brings the people
Yes.
under them to the table. So they're accountable. So that's what I get from that adage. On the other side of it, think about this scenario. If that person of authority and influence, the leader, takes credit first, then the energy, eventually I would think it becomes a vacuum because the more successes there are where they get the energy from the crowd, the externals observers outside of this tribe, that would be all parties that could recognize the outcome outside of the group performing the outcome. Because there's infinite levels to life. There's infinite tribes, and we're borrowing energy from each other. Attention, right? Recognition, capital, time and energy, space, resources, imagination, creativity, inspiration, all of that is like energy. I would argue that it would become a bottleneck because all the Davids, like all the potential future slaves of power, if we throw it on its head, right? What is the leader? They're a slave to power. If they're going to be if they're going to create value, they have to be there. They have to be invested. They have to be listening and telling the truth, and therefore they have to be within proximity. That they can't be far away in a castle. Eventually there'll be a revolt if they did that.
I
So they're
think
going to be with their people. So where I'm going with this is the adage. What I get from the adage is if the leader takes the credit every time over a series of games, it's the credit, the recognition that would raise separate the wheat from the chaff.
Yes.
Meaning, so if I need to be recognized by my aunts and uncles, not just my parent, but by my aunts and uncles, by my cousins, by strangers, the world, so I'm a part of the team that I've accomplished this, that we've done this. It's recognition that raises up the future individuals that then will perform the labor proudly, competently, and choose, meaning they'll think they've chosen at some level, and they have chosen, right? Free will is complicated.
I think you've articulated the difference between credit and accountability or responsibility. And I think I was having a hard time articulating that. And so you did a good job of kind of, because when I'm thinking about that adage that we were talking about is really about who gets credit and who gets blame, right? And so I don't really think a lot about blame. I think about solving problems. And so, absolutely the team should get credit 100% of the time. I think what I was trying to articulate about the leader is that the leader is accountable for either one, right? They're accountable to their organization, to their subordinates. They have to hold themselves accountable for whatever the outcome is, right? And learn from whatever the outcome is. But as far as like credit or public credit or taking credit, I think that you made a very interesting point about kind of like the more that happens from the leader, the more separate they become from the team, right? So like you start taking more and more credit.
If the person in a position, and I would even go so far to say, not even call them the leader without them representing leadership and interaction, the person in a position of authority and influence, of authority that has influence and therefore power, subconsciously desires credit, and they will undermine the potential for future leadership. So they'll 100%. Ironically enslave themselves to the object they wish to become separate from. And the object they wish to become separate from is the responsibility of their labor. So
they self-sabotage as well, because if your focus is getting credit for yourself, your actions will be altered to, and this, we've seen this in leadership in all kinds of different organizations, right? If your goal as a leader or somebody in a position of power, as you articulate, is to get credit for yourself, then I would argue that actually changes a lot of times the decisions that you make and the actions that you take, that oftentimes sabotages the overall success of that organization and thus your own success. And you might get credit in the short term for short-term wins, or if you're somebody that's cutthroat, say in a mid-level position, and you're being unethical just to try to get credit from somebody else and to get your way up, that'll eventually catch up with you. But I can see that this has happened so many times, and just, it's almost kind of our human nature that if it is your goal to get credit, then it will change your actions and your behaviors and decisions that you make that are not necessarily for the overall good of the organization, which is ultimately your success. right? If you're in that organization.
Yes, and this is a naturally occurring phenomena of business because it's in fact the subconscious pull to recognition, to glory, of credit
I think it's
that
in everybody. Yeah.
precedes the founding of a vision, the
Yes.
founding of a business. What Without that impulse, there are less likely the variables for the founding consciousness to sustain the adversities that are constant in the development of a business in the first place. Specifically, the founding psychology. It needs that impulse, and simultaneously it must shed that impulse and rebuild it, and shed it and rebuild it perpetually, forever, as it institutionalizes into a corporation and becomes another organism outside of, like, a hyperbolic example would be the difference between Christ as a metaphor and Christianity. It's a person, and then there's an idea. So in a business sense, and I think on an individual level, all human beings are representing a narrative in their iterative interactive behaviors, in their life, in all of our lives. We're acting out and interacting through relationships relating to objectives. We're all in this story simultaneously, in these infinite amount of stories simultaneously. Where the hell are we going with this? The point is that the person in a position of authority and with the capacity to influence the team benefits from subordinates being recognized for the truth, because they will then stretch the capital base. They will stretch the resources, the debt equity needed, the resources needed to serve more customers. They will stretch, and when the organization stretches, the person above the newly recognized subordinate or subordinates, the natural thought would be they would stretch too, right? They'd move up the chain. Now, they may not move up the chain, though. At any moment, everything that I've ever done could be undermined by the decision I make next. That's a call to character. That's a call to personal responsibility. Like, with more power comes like more opportunity to absolve oneself of the trust of the culture. That becomes, like a call to, I can get away with whatever the hell I can want to get away with now because I have power. Will I actually do it? It becomes a whole deeper even deeper conversation interpersonally.
We were talking about the desire to take credit, right? And I think everybody has a little bit of that. They want that recognition, right? Recognition.
Well, how could we
humans.
how could we not if we're social, how could we not? Isn't there something beautiful in that? What child doesn't want to become the parent, the better a better version of themselves, right? It's potential. But I'm saying that it can be, I think this is where you're going. Where are you going?
Yeah. But so we all have that kind of innate nature to desire that to some degree. But as a leader, again, that's something that cognitively you have to be aware of And kind of like going back to what we were talking about much earlier in the podcast is, how do you change your behavior? Well, you got to be aware of that tendency. And then you have to understand, like you were saying, the goals of the organization benefit, and you benefit also along with that from not actively seeking that recognition, right? So you have to be cognitively aware of that principle.
I'd even argue that the seeking of it will destroy when it's out of
For sure.
balance. I think it's connected
Right.
to how the person of authority and influence can listen, engage, be present with, interact with their people. The one that's never listening, that's only self-glorifying, they're going to be surrounded by yes people forever.
Right. That's what I was talking about earlier with influences. When you are focused on receiving credit or recognition, then it changes your behavior, it changes your decisions, it changes all of those things and how you operate the company or operate the organization or whatever part you're responsible for. And it causes all those things, all those even just minor subtle differences in your actions and your day-to-day that also influence your team. And then you mentioned there's a whole separate effect of the team not getting recognition that influences, or getting recognition that influences their behavior. And there is a profound effect when employees of an organization feel bought in and feel a part of that organization, have that culture of they really feel like their mission is in line with their values. The individual's values are in line with the mission of the business or the organization. Remarkable things can happen. But that can get easily stifled by a leader who is essentially just taking all the credit and, a narcissistic type of behavior. So I think, that is the reason that adage is in place is because for good. I think we've parsed out that that's for good reason.
And I just want to be clear that I think it runs counter to the actual energies that start any business.
Do you think that's why
I would argue
entrepreneurs
that
have to
great people work for? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Do you think that's why entrepreneurs have to be reminded about like your why? Like, hey, why did you start this? What problem are you trying to solve? What gift were you trying to give to people?
An
Why did you start?
entrepreneur, a founder doesn't need to be reminded of their why. They are what they are.
Okay.
But anyone can found a business.
Right.
So I think that our culture yearns to turn entrepreneurs into priests because God is dead metaphorically, and our culture is moving toward the secular humanism. I have like a lot of thoughts on this. Fuck it, we'll do it live. We should do part two of this. We're expecting a bit much out of our entrepreneurs. We're turning them into priests because we don't believe in priests anymore. I think culturally, I'm serious. I think it's tied to the lack of faith we have as a species. Pop culturally is actually trying to force businesses to be business owners, to be priests, to be perfect human beings. And I'm not saying that's actually the wrong or right thing to do. I'm just saying that that's what I think is happening. And what I want to say is that how the human entrepreneur works, the brain, the mind of the founder type. Remember, anybody could decide to start a business because that's how this country system
talking
works.
about the
But
entrepreneur.
I'm talking about the as a social science, self-defined social scientist of, as Popper would say, a pseudoscientist of entrepreneurs, studying entrepreneurship, studying entrepreneurs, studying business, and working specifically with the founder psychology. I do not think the founder has to figure out their why. I think they it'll get louder over time. It's like it just is what it is. It is that. It's gene, environment, interaction. That's what they are. That's what they are. That's what they do. Now, because anybody could start a business, the more acolytes that they lose in their journey from, the sins that presuppose the virtue of the business, more and more businesses are created by those that are going to figure out, are they going to own a business or not? The marketplace will test them, and the marketplace will either destroy the business or destroy them. Now, if it destroys the business, then they're out of business. They'll go work for somebody else. If it destroys them, they've succeeded at the business, and now they become the business. I saw my old business partner recently, and he was saying, you were searching many years ago. We were working together, and he said, at the time I was searching for who I am, and it's true. And I said, yeah, I still am. And I said something to the effect of, will I ever find who I am, or will I be told who I am and what I am based on what I accomplish and how I am serving the culture? Right. So I bring that up to this point, that I think with the fate of the business success is if you fail in business, the business is destroyed. If you succeed in business, you are. Now, how can that be mitigated? Maybe it's the beginning of the conversation, an effort in awareness to combat the objectification that comes with the fruits of labor, the objectification that comes with glory, the recognition that comes with virtue, the adoration. It's like that Nietzsche quote, something about there's an innocence and admiration for he who may not know that someday he could be admired, or something like that. There's an innocence and admiration for he who may not know that one day he could be admired, something like that. There's an innocence and admiration. So that's my thought.
Is admiring others, not
I gotta find the quote.
That one day he might be admired.
Let me look it up. What are your thoughts on this? Where the hell did we go today?
Oh, we went a lot of different places. Yeah, I think the true, and when I say entrepreneur, I'm not talking about just anybody that goes and starts an LLC. I'm talking about the entrepreneur that you're talking about, the true entrepreneur that can't help themselves, essentially. They can't do anything else. That is who they are. It is an identity. I think that person definitely has a unique psychology. I think that the accolades play a role in, again, with everybody. But I think there's something else that that drives them. It's not just that. I think it's who they are, and they're driven by, and maybe I'm just speaking about myself, but to me, it's like there's another, it's almost like you can't help yourself. That's how I feel. And so the accolades are nice or whatever. Yeah. But it's more than that. And so, I'm honestly, for me, I've just seen when I've started a business, it's because, and this is a little bit of a, what's the word where you say that it's overused, but I just see a problem and I'm like, I want to fix that. I have the ability to fix it and I want to fix it. So every business I've started has basically come about that way. I'm happy with my W-2 job. I'm happy doing hospital medicine, but I can't see an opportunity, but there's also probably 20 other business ideas that I have that I haven't done. So, that I would love to do. Just, time is finite. So I had definitely have the entrepreneur bug. But I don't do it for recognition, or I haven't gotten any recognition. So in any of my businesses, I don't do it for recognition. It's for, um, it, not sport. Maybe it's a challenge. Maybe it's, the you see something that, could be done, and you see a need or an opportunity, and it looks like an interesting challenge. So I don't know. That's kind of my experience. I don't know if it's, I'm sure there are some entrepreneurs that feel that way, and then there are others that are completely different. What's your
Here's
take
the
on that?
quote. There is an innocence in admiration. It occurs in one who has not yet realized that they might one day be admired. One of
Hmm.
my favorite quotes. There is an innocence in
Hmm.
admiration. It occurs in one who has not yet realized that they might one day be admired.
Yeah, that's it's interesting that he has that insight in a day when we didn't have internet and television and the mega celebrities. I guess there were mega celebrities of that day as well, but it I think there's a lot of people that have fame that would highly agree with that quote, and I can recognize that I don't have fame, but I can recognize it, and I can recognize its effect on people. I mean, that's what he's saying, right? Essentially, fame, right?
There is an innocence in admiration.
The
It
way I
occurs in one who has not yet realized that they might one day be admired.
the way I hear that is somebody is admiring another, and it's innocent because they don't realize the damage that it does to a human that is admired.
Interesting. The
That's how
damage
I
to
hear
them.
that. Yes. The
And
ad
how so?
that's how I hear that.
What damage to the person being admired?
Well, kind of like where I was going with the whole fame type of thing. Your psyche, it influences your own perception of your own self. It influences how you can move about the world. Um, it changes how you live. And I think it changes how you live again, like from the base level of how you even view yourself and how other people view you, and everything you do in your daily life, depending on the magnitude of that admiration. That's kind of how I see it now in the context of this conversation. Now, in the context of another conversation, I might have interpreted it a different way. Maybe you're talking about a one-on-one relationship with somebody admiring you, and maybe it's in that context. I don't know, but in the context of this conversation, that's how I interpreted it. What would you say would be your interpretation of that?
Well, thanks for cooperating.
I really want to know. I just want to know your thoughts.
There's an innocence in admiration. It occurs in one who has not yet realized that they might one day be admired. I think that the innocence is the negation of the individual's revealing of their genius. The innocence is the individual's not developed into their potential, their authenticity of structure and form in this world. There's an innocence and admiration. It occurs in one who has not yet realized that they might one day be admired. They've not yet realized, they have not self-performed their gift, if at all any. I want to believe, I don't know that this be true, but I want to live in this world believing that each of our listeners is gifted. I just choose to believe that so that I can live with myself and not be a cruel, evil-minded person in this world. Too cynical. I'm already
I see.
I don't want to be a cynic. So I think that is the innocence is the distraction. I think that it's a byproduct, in the context of this conversation. The innocence is definitely a byproduct of a leader that can attract sycophants and neophytes, followers, yes people. For every yes person is somebody not clapping for themselves. So, I mean, there's so many ways to look at this.
I like your interpretation better than mine. I think that actually makes
I think
sense.
It's unfair to be self-critical because
no, I'm not. No, just.
Well, I'll accept it.
I'm
don't want you to be.
One of the reasons I like talking to other people is I get to get outside my own head and hear other interpretations of the world. And so this is a perfect example of why I like to have these conversations, because otherwise I would have never got to hear that version or that interpretation. I actually think that makes more sense, the way you described it. So that's great. Yeah, they haven't yet realized their potential, essentially. Yeah.
Well, how can one, if they're so busy and so preoccupied obsessing over others?
Right.
Or worshiping the self-glorification of another. And we see this in the theme of this conversation, the subordinate that's wings are clipped by the person in authority with influence, and ultimately their relationship can be a relationship rooted in a power dynamic of the subordinate being the labor, the authority being only the word, not laboring, not actualizing, laboring, practically representing the values, not working in a new context as hard, which the subordinate would see, would then trust their value. Example, if somebody gets hired and now all of a sudden I'm on vacation and I do nothing, I'm undermining the culture.
Right.
Because now I'm creating a labor class separate from the, higher than thou class. And that's popularized in our entrepreneurial community. And that's not a conspiracy. I think that's a naturally occurring phenomena of entrepreneurship, because it's partly the fantasy of the entrepreneur to be free. Thus, they're a slave. See, there's two slaves. There's one that chooses and there's one that doesn't. And the one that doesn't is the slave, and the one that chooses is free. It's how you break the paradox. And the entrepreneur that breaks it will be a man, or man, that's unfair. Will be a person, will be a partner, will be a parent, will be a sibling, will be a friend, will be good for the culture. And the one that doesn't break it will be Leviathan. They'll be the devil. They'll be a corrupt, corpse of a person that sucks off culture and consumes culture and then has to defend itself against culture when culture rises up to just try to destroy it. And this is the capitalistic, communistic interaction. And I think the entrepreneur's value system plays a role in it. And not to say that it's the role, the catalyst. It's reactionary, I think, to the values of the culture, to the structure of the culture. But it plays a role, and I like studying that role. But that's some of what I'd like to say, I guess, on the show, is that if anyone's still listening, culture matters. Wow.
Well, if they're not, at least we've enjoyed ourselves.
I guess what's the final word today? How can our guests that we've let into our one-on-one business mastermind, because they're our guests, the listeners are our guests today in this conversation of ours about this topic. What's our guest takeaway?
Well, we have been all over the place as far as topics go. But to me, I think developing leadership skills, which are just people skills, and understanding those principles. If you're a leader and you're in a leadership position, you are obligated to do everything in your power to continually develop those skills. And it is to your own benefit and the benefit of your organization to do so. That would be the best summation I could conjure up.